I'll never forget the moment my 6-year-old daughter Hazel stood up in that courtroom, her tiny voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The judge had just asked her a simple question about living with mommy and daddy, and everyone expected another rehearsed answer. Instead, my little girl, wearing the pink dress with daisies that she'd picked out herself that morning, looked directly at Judge Patricia Thornwell and said something that changed everything. "Your Honor, should I tell you why Daddy really wants us? The thing he said about the money Grandma left in our names?" The entire courtroom froze. I watched Roland's face transform from smug confidence to pure panic in a matter of seconds. His expensive lawyer, Mr. Victor Ashford, started shuffling papers frantically. My own lawyer, Ms. Janet Riverside, grabbed my hand under the table, squeezing it tight. We both knew something monumental was about to happen. Roland jumped up from his chair so fast it scraped against the floor with a horrible screech. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck as he screamed at our daughter, "Shut up! Don't listen to her! She doesn't know what she's talking about!" But Judge Thornwell was already in motion. She slammed her gavel so hard the sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. "Bailiff, detain him! Mr. Greystone, you will remain silent or be held in contempt of court." Two uniformed bailiffs immediately moved toward Roland, positioning themselves on either side of him. He stood there, fists clenched, breathing hard, looking like a trapped animal. The man who'd spent 6 weeks painting me as an unfit mother who'd walked into court that morning, sure he was going to take my children away, was watching his carefully constructed plan crumble. Judge Thornwell turned back to Hazel, her voice gentle but firm. "Child, please continue. You're safe here. Tell me what you need to say." What Hazel said next didn't just save our family. It exposed a betrayal that ran deeper than I ever imagined, a calculated scheme that had been months in the making. My name is Melinda Greystone, and until that moment in the courtroom, I thought I knew who I'd been married to for 10 years. Roland wasn't just trying to divorce me. He wasn't just trying to take our children because he thought I was a bad mother. He was after something much more sinister, and he'd been planning it since the day my mother Dorothy died 3 months earlier. You see, when someone files for divorce claiming you're an unfit parent, you expect certain things. You expect custody battles. You expect lawyers. You expect accusations and character witnesses. What you don't expect is for your 6-year-old daughter to reveal that your husband has been coaching your children to lie, manipulating them with threats, all to steal their inheritance. That morning had started like any other court day in this nightmare. I'd woken up at 5, too anxious to sleep anyway, made breakfast for Hazel and my 8-year-old son Timothy, even though my stomach was in knots and I couldn't eat a bite myself. I'd braided Hazel's hair the way she liked it, with the purple ribbon she said made her feel brave. Timothy had worn his little suit, the one we'd bought for my mother's funeral, and he'd been so quiet I could barely get him to speak. Roland had arrived at court in his Mercedes, wearing a $3,000 suit, looking every inch the successful real estate developer he wanted everyone to believe he was. He'd brought character witnesses, financial statements, even a child psychologist he'd paid to testify that the children would thrive in a more structured environment. Translation: with him, not with their grieving mother who worked part-time at the local library. For 6 weeks, he'd been building his case methodically. Photos of me crying at the grocery store 2 weeks after Mom died, testimony that I'd seemed distracted and emotional, even a manipulated story from our neighbor claiming she'd heard the kids crying when I was supposedly home. Each piece of evidence had been carefully curated to paint a picture of a woman falling apart, unable to care for her children. And I'd almost believed it myself. That's what happens when someone you trust turns your grief into a weapon against you. You start to question everything. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe the kids would be better off with someone more stable, more successful, more put together. But then Hazel stood up in that witness chair, her legs swinging because they couldn't reach the floor, and she told the truth that would save us all. The money Grandma had left, the girlfriend named Veronica, the failing business, the months of manipulation and lies. All of it was about to come pouring out of a 6-year-old's mouth, and there was nothing Roland could do to stop it. 3 months after losing my mother Dorothy to cancer, I thought the worst was behind me. The funeral was over, the estate was mostly settled, and I was trying to find a new normal for me and the kids. I was working part-time at the local library, a job I'd always loved because it let me be home when Hazel and Timothy got off the school bus. Our house wasn't fancy, just a 3-bedroom colonial on Maple Street, but it was filled with laughter, homework sessions at the kitchen table, and bedtime stories every single night. Roland and I had been married for 10 years, and while things weren't perfect, I believed we were managing. He'd been distant since Mom's funeral, spending more time at his real estate office, coming home late smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't his usual brand. When he did come home, he'd go straight to his office, claiming he had contracts to review, calls to make, deals to close. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy eat dinner with us anymore?" Hazel had asked one evening while I helped her with her coloring book. She was working on a picture of our family, and I noticed she'd drawn Roland standing far apart from the rest of us. "Daddy's working hard to take care of us," I'd told her, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. His job is very busy right now. The truth was, I didn't know why everything felt so different. Roland had always been ambitious, but lately he'd developed an edge of cruelty I'd never seen before. It started with small comments about my appearance. "You've really let yourself go since Dorothy got sick," he'd said one morning, looking at me over his coffee cup. "Maybe you should spend less time moping and more time at the gym." Then came the criticism about my parenting. "You're turning the kids soft," he'd say when I'd hug them after they scraped their knees. "Dorothy babied you, and look where that got you, working part-time in a library like some college student instead of having real ambition." That stung more than I wanted to admit. Yes, I worked at the library, but I loved my job. I helped kids discover books that made them love reading. I organized senior computer classes. I ran the summer reading program that Hazel and Timothy adored. To Roland, none of that mattered because it didn't come with a 6-figure salary. The morning he served me divorce papers, I was making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Timmy's favorite Saturday morning tradition. The kids were still in their pajamas, giggling about something they'd seen on TV. I had batter on my hands and flour in my hair when Roland walked in wearing his best suit, the charcoal one he saved for important meetings. He placed a manila envelope on the counter, right next to the plate where I was stacking pancakes. "I'm filing for divorce, Melinda." Just like that. No warning, no conversation, no marriage counseling, just 5 words that shattered our family. "Roland, what are you talking about?" I managed to whisper, glancing at the kids to make sure they weren't listening. "Can we discuss this privately?" "There's nothing to discuss," he said, his voice cold and businesslike, as if he was closing a real estate deal. "I'm taking the kids. You're an unfit mother, and I have the evidence to prove it. My lawyer will be in touch." He turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway. "Oh, and Melinda, don't try to fight this. You work 20 hours a week. You've been a mess since your mother died, and I have documentation of everything. Every time you've cried in front of the children, every pizza dinner because you were too tired to cook, every moment you've chosen wallowing in grief over being a proper parent." "Roland, please," I started, but he was already gone, leaving me standing there with a spatula in my hand and dinosaur pancakes burning on the griddle. Timothy looked up from his cartoon. "Why was Daddy so mad?" "He wasn't mad, sweetheart," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just stressed about work." But inside, I was reeling. Documentation? Evidence? How long had he been planning this? I thought about all those late nights at the office, the new cologne, the criticism that had become increasingly harsh. Had he been building a case against me while I was nursing my dying mother, while I was planning her funeral, while I was trying to help our children understand why Grandma wouldn't be coming to visit anymore? That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and read through the divorce papers. Roland wasn't just asking for a divorce. He was seeking full custody, claiming I was emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, and neglectful. The man who'd stood next to me at our wedding, who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, was now trying to take away the only thing that mattered to me, our children. The custody hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later, and Roland came prepared for war. He'd hired Victor Ashford, known throughout the county as the lawyer who'd never lost a custody case. The man walked into court that morning like he owned the place, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than I made in a month. Roland sat beside him, confident and composed, wearing a new Rolex I'd never seen before. My lawyer, Ms. Janet Riverside, was competent but clearly outmatched. She was a solo practitioner I'd found through legal aid, and while she believed in my case, she didn't have the resources Roland's team had. They'd hired private investigators, expert witnesses, and even a child psychologist who'd never actually met my children but was prepared to testify about their needs. Mr. Ashford stood up to present Roland's case, his voice smooth and authoritative. Your Honor, we'll demonstrate that Mrs. Greystone, while perhaps well-intentioned, is simply unable to provide the stable, structured environment these children need. Mr. Greystone is a successful businessman who can provide stability, private education, and opportunities these children deserve. Mrs. Greystone works 20 hours a week and has been emotionally compromised since her mother's death. Then came the evidence, each piece more damaging than the last. First, they showed photos of me crying at the grocery store 2 weeks after Mom died. The image was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but you could see my red eyes, the tissues in my hand. This was in public, Your Honor, Ashford said, in front of her children. Imagine what happens at home. Next came testimony from Roland's business partner, Dennis Crawford. I've seen Melinda at company events, he said from the witness stand. She seemed distracted, disconnected. At the last Christmas party, she spent most of the evening sitting alone while Roland networked. The children seemed to gravitate toward their father. What Dennis didn't mention was that the Christmas party was 3 days after Mom's diagnosis, that I'd begged Roland not to make us go, that I'd sat alone because Roland had specifically told me I was embarrassing him with my sadness. They even brought in our neighbor, Mrs. Patricia Hoffman, who claimed she'd heard the kids crying one afternoon when I was supposedly home. It went on for at least an hour, she testified. I was concerned, but I didn't want to interfere. Ms. Riverside cross-examined her, getting her to admit she couldn't be sure I was actually home, that it might have been the babysitter, that kids cry sometimes for normal reasons. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted. Roland took the stand next, and his performance was masterful. He spoke softly, seemingly reluctant to say anything negative about me. I loved Melinda, he said, looking right at me with fake sadness in his eyes. I still do. But since Dorothy's death, she's changed. She spends hours looking at old photos. She cries constantly. The children have told me they're scared when Mommy gets sad. Can you provide specific examples? Ashford prompted. Last month, Hazel asked her mother to help with a school project about families. Melinda broke down sobbing because it reminded her of Dorothy. Hazel ended up doing the project alone. Timothy's been acting out in school, getting into fights. When I asked him about it, he said he was angry because Mommy was always sad. Each word was a carefully placed dagger. The worst part was the tiny kernels of truth twisted into weapons. Yes, I'd cried about the school project, but only after I'd spent 3 hours helping Hazel create a beautiful family tree. Yes, Timothy had gotten into a scuffle at school, but it was because another boy had said something cruel about not having a grandmother anymore. Roland continued his performance. I just want what's best for Hazel and Timothy. They need structure, discipline, and a parent who can focus on their needs, not someone lost in grief. I've already enrolled them in Pemberton Academy for next year. I've set up college funds. I've arranged for tutoring, music lessons, everything they need to succeed. Pemberton Academy, the elite private school that cost $40,000 a year per child. Where was this money coming from? Roland's real estate business had been struggling for the past 2 years. He'd complained about it constantly, said we needed to tighten our belts, which was why I hadn't pushed for more hours at the library. Judge Thornwell was taking notes, occasionally looking at me with what felt like pity mixed with disappointment. Mrs. Greystone, she said during a recess, I understand you've suffered a loss, but these children need stability. The evidence suggests they might benefit from their father's more stable environment. My world was crumbling. Every bedtime story I'd read, every scraped knee I'd kissed, every nightmare I'd chased away seemed to count for nothing against Roland's polished presentation and deep pockets. How could this be happening? How could lying be rewarded while love was dismissed as weakness? The judge had asked to speak with the children in her chambers, but Roland had insisted it happen in open court. Transparency, Your Honor. The children have nothing to hide. His confidence made me sick. The way he leaned back in his chair, so assured of victory, reminded me of the day he'd closed his first big real estate deal. That same smile, that same arrogance. Judge Thornwell agreed to question the children in open court, but insisted on a gentle approach. "I want them to feel comfortable," she said, having the bailiff bring in smaller chairs and placing them closer to her bench rather than in the witness box. "This isn't an interrogation, it's a conversation." Timmy went first, climbing into the chair with his shoulders hunched. My brave little boy looked so small in his funeral suit. He kept glancing at Roland, then at me, then down at his hands. The judge smiled at him warmly. "Timothy, there's no wrong answer here. I just want to know how things are at home. Can you tell me about living with your mom and dad?" Timmy's voice came out in barely a whisper. "Dad says Mom needs help. He says we should live with him so Mom can get better." My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. My own son coached to betray me. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that Roland had fed him these lines, but Ms. Riverside's hand on my arm kept me silent. "What do you think, Timothy?" Judge Thornwell asked gently. "Not what Dad says. What do you think?" Timmy squirmed in his seat. "I don't know. Sometimes Mom cries. Dad says that's bad." "Thank you, Timothy. You did great." The judge nodded to the bailiff, who helped Timmy down. He walked past me without making eye contact, and I felt my composure starting to crack. Roland reached out to pat Timmy's shoulder as he passed, the picture of a concerned father. Then it was Hazel's turn. She climbed up onto the witness chair, her legs dangling, not quite reaching the floor. She'd insisted on wearing her pink dress with daisies that morning, the one she said made her feel brave. Her purple hair ribbon, the one she'd worn to my mother's funeral, caught the light as she turned to face the judge. Judge Thornwell smiled kindly at her. "Hazel, sweetheart, can you tell me about living with Mommy and Daddy?" Hazel looked at Roland first. I saw him give her a small nod, his lips moving slightly as if reminding her of something. Then she looked at me, and I tried to give her an encouraging smile, despite the tears threatening to spill over. "Daddy said I should tell you Mommy cries too much and forgets to make lunch sometimes." Roland nodded approvingly. Mr. Ashford looked satisfied, making a note on his legal pad. Ms. Riverside's grip on my arm tightened. The court reporter's fingers flew across her keys, recording what seemed like the final nail in my coffin. But then Hazel continued, her voice growing stronger. "But that's not true, Your Honor. Mommy cries because she misses Grandma Dorothy, and that's okay because Grandma was wonderful. And Mommy never forgets lunch. She makes special sandwiches cut into stars and hearts. She puts notes in our lunch boxes every day. Yesterday mine said, 'You are my sunshine,' with a smiley face." The courtroom shifted. Roland's jaw tightened visibly. "Hazel, remember what we talked about in the car," he said, his voice carrying a warning. Judge Thornwell's expression changed immediately. "Mr. Greystone, you will not address the child while she's speaking. One more word and you'll be held in contempt." Hazel looked at the judge, then back at Roland, then at me. I saw something change in her face, a decision being made. She sat up straighter, gripped the arms of the chair, and took a deep breath. "Daddy told us to lie," she said clearly. "He made us practice in his office. He said if we didn't help him win, we'd never see Mommy again. He said Mommy was sick in the head because Grandma died, but that's not true. Mommy is sad, but she still takes care of us. She reads us stories every night. She helps with homework. She makes hot chocolate with extra marshmallows when we have bad dreams." The courtroom was completely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, staring at Hazel in shock. Roland's face had gone from red to white, his hands gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. "There's more," Hazel said, her voice smaller now but determined. "Something Daddy doesn't know I heard. Your Honor, should I tell you why Daddy really wants us? The thing he said about the money Grandma left in our names?" That's when everything exploded. Roland jumped up, his chair crashing backward, his control finally snapping. What came next would reveal the truth he'd been so desperate to hide, the real reason he'd orchestrated this entire charade. Roland exploded out of his chair with such force it toppled backward, hitting the floor with a crash that echoed through the courtroom. "Shut up! Don't listen to her! She's confused! She doesn't know what she's talking about!" His face was purple with rage, veins bulging in his neck, spit flying as he screamed at our 6-year-old daughter. Judge Thornwell's gavel came down like thunder. "Bailiff, detain him! Mr. Greystone, you will remain silent or be held in contempt of court." Her voice was sharp as steel, cutting through Roland's outburst. Two uniformed bailiffs immediately moved toward Roland, one placing a firm hand on his shoulder, forcing him back down into his seat. The other stood directly behind him, ready to act if he moved again. "Your Honor, my client is simply concerned about his daughter's confusion," Mr. Ashford started, rising from his seat, his composure cracking for the first time. "Counselor, your client just screamed at a 6-year-old child in my courtroom. Sit down." Judge Thornwell's tone left no room for argument. She turned back to Hazel, her expression softening. "Child, please continue. You're safe here. Tell me what you need to say." My brave little girl took a shaky breath, but her voice was clear. 3 weeks ago, Daddy was on the phone in his office at home. He didn't know I was playing with my dolls behind the couch. I like that spot because it's quiet and cozy. He was talking to someone named Veronica. The name hit me like a physical blow. Veronica. Who was Veronica? "That's his girlfriend, I think," Hazel continued matter-of-factly, "because I saw them kissing at his office once when he brought us there on a Saturday. He said he had to grab some papers, but then I needed to use the bathroom, and when I came back, they were kissing by his desk." The courtroom gasped collectively. Ms. Riverside's hand found mine under the table. Roland's face had gone from purple to ghostly white. Mr. Ashford was frantically whispering to him, but Roland wasn't responding, just staring at Hazel in horror. "Daddy was talking really excited on the phone," Hazel continued. "He told Veronica that Grandma Dorothy left money for me and Timmy, a lot of money. He said it was in something called a trust fund, and that if he got custody, he could control it until we turned 18. Judge Thornwell leaned forward. "Did he say how much money, sweetheart?" Hazel nodded. "He said there was almost $2 million. He kept saying $2 million over and over like he was really happy about it." $2 million. My mother had never mentioned anything about that kind of money. She'd lived modestly, saved carefully. Where had $2 million come from? "He told Veronica his business was in trouble," Hazel continued, each word another nail in Roland's coffin. "He said he owed a lot of money to some bad people and the banks wouldn't give him any more loans. He said, 'Once I get the kids, we can use their money to save the company and buy that beach house in Florida you wanted.'" Timmy suddenly stood up from his seat in the gallery. "I heard it too." His voice cracked with emotion. "I didn't want to say anything because Dad said he'd send Mom away if we didn't help him. But I heard him talking about the money too. He was in his car on speakerphone and I was in the back seat. He forgot I was there." "Timothy, please sit in the witness chair," Judge Thornwell instructed. Timmy practically ran to the chair, eager now to tell the truth. "Dad's been lying about everything," Timmy said, the words pouring out of him. "He made us practice what to say about Mom. He said she was crazy, but she's not. She's sad about Grandma, but she still takes care of us. She helps with homework every night. She makes dinner. Real dinner, not just pizza. Dad's the one who's never home. And when he is home, he just yells at us to be quiet so he can make phone calls." "There's more," Hazel said, her small voice cutting through the courtroom again. "Daddy told Veronica that Mommy was stupid and would never figure it out. He said judges always believe fathers who wear nice suits and have good jobs. He laughed about it, Your Honor. He laughed about taking us away from Mommy. He said once he had the money, he could divorce Mommy and throw her out like trash. Those were his exact words. Throw her out like trash." Judge Thornwell turned to Roland with fire in her eyes. "Mr. Greystone, is there a trust fund established by Dorothy Pemberton for these children?" Roland's lawyer scrambled through his papers, his composure completely shattered. "Your Honor, we weren't aware of any trust fund. This is the first we're hearing of this." "I asked Mr. Greystone, counselor, not you." Roland's voice was barely a whisper, all his arrogance gone. "Yes. And you concealed this from the court? You attempted to gain custody to access funds meant for your children's future? You coached these children to lie about their mother? You've been having an affair while painting your wife as an unfit parent?" The silence in the courtroom was deafening as everyone waited for Roland's response. Judge Thornwell's ruling was swift and decisive. She didn't even retire to her chambers to deliberate. Mr. Greystone, I've seen many custody cases in my 20 years on the bench, but rarely have I witnessed such calculated manipulation of both the court system and innocent children. You've committed perjury, concealed assets, coached minor children to lie under oath, and attempted to defraud them of their rightful inheritance. She turned to Ms. Riverside. Counselor, I'm granting your client immediate full custody with sole legal and physical rights. Mr. Greystone will have supervised visitation only, pending a full investigation by Child Protective Services and the District Attorney's Office for fraud, coercion of minors, and perjury. Your Honor, Mr. Ashford stood up, his designer suit somehow looking less impressive now. My client wishes to appeal. Your client is fortunate he's not leaving here in handcuffs, Judge Thornwell replied sharply. The trust fund established by Dorothy Pemberton will remain protected for the children's education and future, with Mrs. Greystone as the sole trustee. Mr. Greystone, you will pay child support of $3,000 per month, and you're ordered to stay away from the family home except during court-approved visitation. As we walked out of the courthouse, Hazel held my right hand and Timmy held my left. The October sun felt warm on our faces, like my mother's embrace from heaven. Mommy, I'm sorry Daddy was mean to you, Hazel said, looking up at me with those big brown eyes. I knelt down right there on the courthouse steps and hugged both my children tight. You were so brave, sweetheart, both of you. Grandma Dorothy would be so proud. You told the truth when it was hard, when you were scared. That takes real courage. She told me to tell the truth, Hazel said quietly, playing with the purple ribbon in her hair. In my dream last night, Grandma said to be brave and protect you like you protect us. She said the truth always wins, even when liars wear fancy suits. Whether it was really my mother's spirit or just a brave little girl's conscience, I'll never know. But that moment taught me something profound that I'll carry forever. Sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. Sometimes children see through facades that fool adults. Roland had everything on his side. The expensive lawyers, the manufactured evidence, the carefully constructed lies, the practiced testimony. But he didn't count on one thing, a 6-year-old girl who loved her mother more than she feared her father. 3 months later, the full truth came out during the investigation. Roland's real estate company was $800,000 in debt. He'd been taking out loans he couldn't repay, making risky investments that failed, living far beyond his means to maintain an image of success. The Mercedes, the Rolex, the expensive suits, all of it was bought on credit he couldn't afford. His girlfriend Veronica, who turned out to be his secretary, left him the same week his company filed for bankruptcy. The trust fund my mother had established was even more than Hazel had heard. My father had died when I was young, and his life insurance, combined with Mom's lifetime of careful saving and smart investments, totaled $2.3 million. She'd never told me, wanting me to live my life without depending on money, wanting me to find happiness in simple things like she had. The money was meant for Hazel and Timothy's education, their futures, their dreams. Roland had discovered it while going through Mom's papers when he was supposedly helping me with the estate. He sends child support now, court-ordered and automatically deducted from his wages at the car dealership where he works. The kids see him one weekend a month at a supervised facility downtown. Slowly, they're learning to forgive him, not for his sake, but for theirs. I don't want them carrying anger in their hearts. My mother always said hatred is a poison you drink hoping others will suffer. As for me, I went back to school to become a full-time librarian. The library board created a position for me, having heard about our story. Every night, I tuck my children into bed, read them stories, and thank God for their courage. The trust fund sits safely in the bank, waiting for college and dreams my mother wanted to make possible. Hazel wants to be a judge now. Like Judge Thornwell, she says, someone who listens to kids and protects families. Timmy wants to be a teacher, to help kids who are going through hard times. Hazel asked me recently if lying is always bad. I told her yes, lying is wrong, but telling the truth, especially when it's hard, especially when powerful people don't want to hear it, that's the bravest thing anyone can do. She smiled and said, like when I told the judge about Daddy? Exactly like that, baby. Exactly like that. Some battles aren't won with money or power or perfectly pressed suits. Sometimes they're won by a little girl who refuses to let injustice win, who stands up in a big scary courtroom and speaks the truth that everyone needs to hear. My mother always said the truth has a way of finding light, even in the darkest places. Turns out she was right, and she made sure her granddaughter knew it too. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about a time when truth prevailed in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life stories that remind us all that courage comes in all sizes. And sometimes, the smallest heroes make the biggest difference.